Imagine this. You are walking to your car after a long day. A man approaches you. He is well-dressed. He is smiling. He seems friendly, the kind of person your mother would call a gentleman. He is struggling with a bag. He asks for your help. You help him, because that is what decent people do. And that is the last decision you ever make. This is not a scene from a movie. This is how Ted Bundy chose his victims. In broad daylight, in public places, with a smile on his face and a kind word on his lips. Ted Bundy did not look like a killer. He did not act like a killer. He was handsome, well-spoken, educated, and so charming that people genuinely enjoyed being around him. Women were attracted to him. Men respected him. Lawyers said he could have had a brilliant career in court if he had chosen a different path. He chose a different path, all right. Between 1974 and 1978, Ted Bundy kidnapped, assaulted, and murdered at least 30 women across 7 states. The true number, investigators believe, could be far higher. Bundy himself hinted at over 100 victims before he was executed in 1989. But here is the question that has fascinated psychologists, criminologists, and researchers for decades. How does a man that everyone trusted become one of the most dangerous predators America has ever seen? How do you hide a monster inside a charming smile? Welcome back to Dark Minds Uncovered. Today we go inside the mind of Ted Bundy. Not just the crimes, but the psychology, the why, the how, the parts of this story that most people never talk about. Because by the end of this video, you will understand something deeply uncomfortable about human nature, and it might just protect you or someone you love. Let us begin. Theodore Robert Bundy was born on November 24, 1946, in Burlington, Vermont. His early life looked completely ordinary on the surface. He grew up in a regular neighborhood. He went to school. He had friends. By the time he reached university, he was studying psychology of all subjects at the University of Washington. He was described by almost everyone who knew him at this time as charming, intelligent, and full of potential. But underneath that polished surface, things were not as clean as they appeared. As a child, Ted Bundy grew up not knowing who his real father was. For years, he was raised believing his grandparents were his parents and that his mother was actually his older sister. When he eventually discovered the truth about his real identity, something shifted inside him. Something he never fully recovered from. He began to feel deeply disconnected from other people, like he was watching the world through a window, able to see everyone else living and loving and connecting, but unable to truly feel those things himself. He learned very early that he could pretend, and he was extraordinarily good at it. By his mid-20s, Ted Bundy had become what psychologists would later describe as a textbook mask wearer. A person who builds a carefully constructed public persona, warm, likable, trustworthy, while hiding an entirely different reality underneath. He worked at a suicide prevention hotline. Let that sink in for a moment. A man who would go on to take dozens of lives spent his days talking people back from the edge of theirs. He was active in politics. He was well liked by his colleagues. One of the women he worked with at the hotline later said, and I want you to hear this clearly, she described Ted Bundy as one of the kindest, most caring people she had ever met. She had no idea. Nobody did. Because Ted Bundy had spent years studying people the way most of us study a subject in school. He watched. He listened. He learned exactly what people wanted to see, what made them feel comfortable, what made them trust. And then he gave them all of it. It was not genuine. It was a performance. And it was flawless. In January 1974, Ted Bundy committed his first confirmed attack. His victims survived, but barely. 1 month later, his first murder. Over the next 4 years, Bundy moved across the United States like a ghost. Washington, Oregon, Utah, Colorado, Florida. Wherever he went, young women disappeared. Most of them shared similar features: long dark hair, parted in the middle. Some researchers believe this was connected to a woman who had broken his heart years earlier. A woman he had been deeply in love with and who had left him. A woman he never got over. His method was always calculated, always controlled. He sometimes wore a fake cast on his arm or walked on crutches to appear vulnerable and non-threatening. He would ask women for small favors, help carrying something to his car. And then, in a moment that they never saw coming, everything changed. He was arrested for the first time in 1975 in Utah during a routine traffic stop. Officers found suspicious items in his car. He was linked to a kidnapping. He was convicted. But Ted Bundy was not done. In 1977, he escaped from custody. Twice. The second time, he fled to Florida and disappeared into a new city where nobody knew his name or his face. And he killed again. On January 15, 1978, Ted Bundy entered the Chi Omega sorority house at Florida State University in the middle of the night. In the space of less than 30 minutes, he attacked 4 women. 2 of them died. 3 weeks later, he abducted and murdered a 12-year-old girl named Kimberly Leach. She would be his last known victim. He was arrested again in February 1978, driving a stolen car. This time, there was no escape. Ted Bundy went to trial in Florida. And in a decision that shocked the legal world, he chose to represent himself in court. He stood in front of the jury that would decide his fate and argued his own case with the same charm and confidence he had used his entire life. It did not work. He was convicted. He was sentenced to death. On January 24, 1989, Ted Bundy was executed in the electric chair at Florida State Prison. He was 42 years old. In the days before his execution, he gave a series of interviews. He blamed pornography. He blamed external influences. Even at the very end, Ted Bundy could not bring himself to take full, honest responsibility for what he had done, because that would have meant dismantling the one thing he had protected his entire life, the image of himself as someone special, someone above ordinary consequence. Now let us talk about what was really going on inside Ted Bundy's mind, because this is where it gets deeply fascinating and deeply important. Psychologists and forensic experts who studied Ted Bundy's case have identified several key psychological realities that explain how a man like him is made. None of these are excuses, but all of them are important to understand. The first and most dominant psychological force inside Ted Bundy was narcissism. And not just the everyday narcissism that we use to describe someone who posts too many selfies. Clinical, full-spectrum narcissistic personality disorder. Here is what that actually means in simple terms. A person with narcissistic personality disorder genuinely believes they are special, different, above the rules that apply to everyone else. They have an enormous need to be admired. They lack real empathy, not because they are sad about it, but because they simply do not register other people's pain as something that matters. In Bundy's case, this showed up in everything he did. He believed he was smarter than the police investigating him, and he told people so. He believed he was smarter than the lawyers prosecuting him, so he fired his own legal team and represented himself. He believed, deep down, that he deserved more than what life had given him. More admiration, more success, more control. And when the real world did not give him those things, he took them, on his own terms, in the most violent way imaginable. The narcissistic mind does not see other people as full human beings with their own lives, feelings, and value. It sees them as objects, as things that exist in relation to what they can provide. And when that view of the world goes unchecked, it becomes extraordinarily dangerous. The second psychological reality of Ted Bundy's case is one that criminologist Hervey Cleckley described decades ago in his landmark work on psychopathy, what he called the mask of sanity. A psychopath, and Bundy displayed many classic psychopathic traits, is not out of touch with reality. They are not confused or delusional. They understand perfectly well how the world works and what is expected of them. They simply choose not to follow those rules. And they are very good at pretending that they do. Bundy's charm was not accidental. It was strategic. He had observed from a very young age that warmth and likability opened doors. That people trusted attractive, well-spoken individuals more quickly. That a smile was a tool. He used all of it deliberately. This is why so many people who knew Ted Bundy personally refused to believe he was guilty even after his conviction. Because the person they had known, the kind, funny, engaged person who remembered their birthdays and asked about their families, simply did not match the monster being described in court. And that is exactly the point. The mask is designed to make the monster invisible. And in Ted Bundy's case, the mask was so good that it fooled almost everyone, almost all of the time. The third psychological thread running through Ted Bundy's story is one that researchers have found in a significant number of violent offenders. Deep, unresolved pain around rejection and attachment. Remember what we said earlier. Ted Bundy grew up not knowing the truth about who he was. He discovered as a young man that his entire early identity had been built on a lie. That the family structure he had trusted was not what he had been told. That kind of early identity rupture does not just go away. It shapes how a person learns to attach to other people, how much they trust, how deeply they fear being abandoned or humiliated again. When the woman he loved deeply walked away from him in his early 20s, that fear of rejection became something much darker. Researchers who studied his case noted that many of his victims shared physical similarities with that woman. Long dark hair, a similar build, a similar look. This was almost certainly not a coincidence. Bundy's violence at its psychological root was also about control, about power, about never again being in the position of the person who gets left behind. In his mind, as twisted and broken as that mind was, his crimes gave him something the real world had repeatedly taken from him: power over other people. That psychological need for control, born from early rejection and identity confusion, fed by narcissism and an absent conscience, is what turned a charming, intelligent young man into one of the most dangerous killers in American history. The fourth and final psychological reality of the Ted Bundy case is the one that most directly applies to us, to ordinary people living ordinary lives. Why did nobody see it? The uncomfortable answer is this: because we are wired not to. Human beings are social creatures. We are built to connect, to trust, to respond positively to warmth and likability. These instincts have served our species well for hundreds of thousands of years. But those same instincts can be exploited. When someone is attractive, well-dressed and friendly, our brains automatically begin to lower their guard. Psychologists call this the halo effect, the unconscious tendency to assume that people who seem pleasant on the outside must also be good on the inside. Ted Bundy understood the halo effect better than most psychology professors. He dressed well on purpose. He spoke carefully on purpose. He was charming on purpose. Because he knew, from years of watching people, that presentation was a shortcut to trust. And trust was the only weapon he ever really needed. Let me speak to you directly. Because the Ted Bundy case is not just a dark story from the past. It carries lessons that are as relevant today as they were in 1974. Here are 4 things the Ted Bundy case teaches us about recognizing dangerous people in real life. Lesson 1: charm is not the same as character. This is the most important lesson this entire case has to offer. Charm is a skill. Anybody can learn it. It is a performance, a set of behaviors designed to make other people feel good. Character is something completely different. Character is what a person does when nobody is watching. It is how they treat people who cannot do anything for them. It is how they respond when things do not go their way. The next time someone's charm makes you feel immediately comfortable and trusting, slow down. Let time reveal their character. Because charm can be faked from day one. Character takes much longer to hide. Lesson 2: pay attention to how someone talks about people who have wronged them. One of the clearest windows into a narcissistic or psychopathic personality is how they talk about people from their past. Exes, former friends, old colleagues. If every single person who has ever left someone's life is described as terrible, crazy, jealous, or stupid, that is a pattern worth noticing. Because the one common factor in all of those relationships is the person telling you the story. Bundy repeatedly spoke about his victims, the justice system, and the people in his life with contempt and dismissal. He never genuinely acknowledged the humanity of the people he had destroyed. That contempt does not appear overnight. It shows up in conversation long before it shows up anywhere else. Lesson 3: trust your instincts, even when your brain argues against them. Several women who survived encounters with Ted Bundy described feeling something was slightly off, even though they could not explain why. Something about the situation that made them uncomfortable. But they ignored it because everything looked normal on the surface. Your instincts are not random. They are your brain processing thousands of tiny signals below the level of conscious thought. Microexpressions, body language inconsistencies, situational details that do not quite add up. When something feels wrong, even if you cannot explain it, take it seriously. It is almost always better to be wrong and safe than to be right and not here to talk about it. Lesson 4. The most dangerous person in the room is rarely the one who looks dangerous. We have been conditioned by films, television, and stories to imagine dangerous people as obviously threatening, wild-eyed, aggressive, visibly unstable. The reality of criminal psychology tells a very different story. The most dangerous individuals, the ones who cause the most harm over the longest period of time, are almost always the ones nobody suspected. The helpful neighbor, the charming colleague, the kind stranger in the parking lot. This is not to make you paranoid about every kind person you meet. Most kind people are genuinely kind, but it is a reminder to never let appearance and charm alone be the basis of your trust. Trust is something that should be built over time, through actions, through consistency, through what someone does, not just how they make you feel in the first 10 minutes. Ted Bundy was executed on January 24, 1989. As the news spread that morning, crowds gathered outside the prison. Some of them cheered, and in the years since, his name has become one of the most studied, most analyzed, and most debated in the entire history of criminal psychology. Not because he was the most prolific killer in history. He was not. Not because his crimes were the most complex. They were not. But because of the gap. The enormous, terrifying gap between who Ted Bundy appeared to be and who he actually was. That gap is what makes this case matter beyond the headlines and the documentaries. Because that gap is not unique to Ted Bundy. It exists in every community, in every city, in every corner of the world where someone has learned to use the appearance of goodness as a cover for something deeply dangerous. Understanding that gap, understanding how it works, what feeds it, and how to recognize it is not just psychology. It is self-protection. And that is exactly what we do here at Dark Minds Uncovered. Every single week, we go deeper than the story. We go into the science, the psychology, and the real lessons that the darkest cases in human history have to teach us. If today's video made you think differently, if it made you look at charm and trust and first impressions in a new way, then hit subscribe. Because next week, we are covering a case that will shake you just as deeply. A man who never personally killed anyone, yet convinced hundreds of ordinary people, doctors, lawyers, teachers, parents, to end their own lives and the lives of their children. A man whose weapon was not a knife or a gun. It was his voice. Jim Jones. The full story. Next week on Dark Minds Uncovered. Drop a comment below and tell me, what part of the Ted Bundy story disturbed you the most? Was it the charm? The mask? The fact that so many people trusted him completely? Tell me. I read every single comment on this channel. Like this video if it taught you something new. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And I will see you next week.